from the drinks trolley. I would think like a nice rosé would go down very well, but let's find out. What are you grabbing there as it goes past?
Well, you could have a rosé. There's a very nice one called Trouble that I had in M&S the other day. So that one's very delicious, cloudy rosé. But I've gone with a pale ale called Sky Above, which is Citra, Simcoe and Mosaic hops.
Oh, right.
4.5%. Very bright and delicious.
Okay, well, we'll try one of those a little bit later once we're done here.
Yeah.
Today's confession comes from Joe DiMaggio.
Oh.
That's how.
What?
Well, that's how he signed it anyway.
Right.
Father Simon, Brother Matt, Sister Susie. My confession comes to the halcyon days of the 1980s. I believe Simon had just joined Radio 1, and I will use the pseudonym, if it's okay, of Joe DiMaggio, famous American sports person. I was a police officer, says Joe, working shifts in a busy area. I won't name the force or the station. I was partnered with a colleague I shall call Baron Munchausen due to his propensity for spouting outrageously exaggerated tales, smelling suspiciously like bovine manure.
Okay.
You name it, he had done it. He had trials for various professional football and Formula One teams, but turned them down to follow his vocation. He dated numerous famous women, from actresses to models and singers. He had single-handedly arrested gangs of armed robbers and rescued people from burning buildings, and he seemed to believe what he was saying, whilst everyone else could see through it. More of which in a moment. On the night in question, we were on our grub break in our small canteen cum restroom, playing pool and relaxing. We only had 2 pool cues, one that was damaged but still just about usable, and a good one. As the Baron was, of course, the world champion pool player in a previous life, he insisted on having the better one, befitting his skill and status, and I was left with the broken one. We'd got in the habit, only on nights when there was nobody else in the canteen, of using our waste silver foil, which had kept our Spam sandwiches fresh, to scrunch into balls and pretend that we were in the Baseball World Series. Using an inverted pool cue as a baseball bat, it was imperative to hold the pool cue 3/4 of the way towards the tip end to A, give a greater surface area to strike the ball, and B, the metal weights in the end of the cue gave it greater heft and therefore kinetic energy to hit a home run.
Good thinking.
Running around the pool table, that's what you had to do.
Yeah.
We were bottom of the third and the bases were loaded, whatever that means. And I was in, says Joe. The ball is thrown towards me. I could see the ball floating towards me in perfect clarity, moving from left to right with a heavy anti-clockwise spin. My feet were planted, core engaged, opening my body up slightly as I struck the ball perfectly. Everything now happened in slow motion. As I saw the ball's ideal trajectory travelling the length of the room, but at the same time, one of the 2-inch steel weights flew out of the damaged cue.
Oh, no.
It travelled like a bullet from the Matrix, as straight as an arrow and straight onto the Baron's head.
Oh.
All of a sudden, everything changed to double speed as the Baron went down like a felled bull elephant. Not understanding what had happened, others assumed that he'd been shot through the window, which overlooked the road, and dived on the floor. We worked in a pretty violent area, and it wasn't beyond the realms of possibility.
Okay.
And blood had started spurting out of the wound, which thankfully had missed any vital organs on his head, but only just. 4 of us sprang into action. Sherlock, he was the best and hardest working police officer I ever came across, ran to the toilet and grabbed an industrial-sized toilet roll. Muppet, who was the most useless police person ever trained, ran across the car park to our admin building to alert our supervisor, and Bradall, a small, boring tool, dialed 999, and I grabbed a mop to start eliminating the incriminating evidence. After a few wipes with the mop, I looked round to see the Baron looking like Carmen Miranda, as Sherlock had used the entire loo roll to his head. His head was now about 1/2 metre in diameter. The paramedics turned up and took the Baron off to hospital, where he was admitted, and I visited him the following day, because it was the least I could do, really. I entered the ward to find the Baron being attended to by a host of nurses. He had, of course, turned the circumstances to his advantage and told them he'd sustained the injury while arresting burglars and had been beaten up with a pickaxe. But our hero still managed to arrest them all before colleagues turned up, and then he lost consciousness. You could get tired of
yes,
this.
a little.
So I feel compelled to ask a few people for forgiveness. Clearly, our supervisor had to investigate what had happened, as the initial thoughts were that it was a deliberate assault on the annoying Baron. The prime Suspect for this was Sherlock, who had an uncomfortable few days under suspicion. To the nursing staff, who got suckered into believing they were caring for a real-life hero and prospective George Medal winner for gallantry, and to the rest of the shift because we were banned from holding the World Series ever again. I would ask the Baron for forgiveness, but he is no longer with us. But I really seek forgiveness from Sister Susie, as I am sure she can see it was an accident with no malice whatsoever. Sherlock was exonerated, the Baron basked in the limelight and attention he craved, and most importantly, we got some new pool cues, which is, of course, a very good turn-up for the books there in the end. From Joe DiMaggio. Well, who'd have thought it? Well, a very eventful evening. What do you say, Suze? Because he's particularly focusing his forgiveness request on you.
Yeah, well, he is right. There wasn't any malice, but by half wasn't he stupid? Why are you playing baseball with a broken pool cue and crumped up silver paper inside? Just asking for trouble. Danger there. I've also got a little issue with you mopping up the evidence before you're actually attending to the person that's injured or calling 999, although someone else did that. So I know.
Yeah, that was Bradall, a small boring tool.
Okay.
The Baron does sound like an idiot, and we all know that person that you just can't stand because they go on and on and on about all the things you've done, and they've done it before you did, and all of these things. So for that reason, I'm going to forgive him.
Brother Matthew.
Yeah, I'm going to forgive. I thought that was rather good with the queue. Who'd have thought that the end of the queue would come off? No one could have seen that coming.
No.
So that's fair enough. And they dialed 999. You'd think they'd have a direct line in the police for the people on the 999.
It's the 80s.
It was the 80s, wasn't it? That's true. And everything else went well, and your man ended up in hospital. Everyone thought he was great, but they didn't get to play baseball anymore. Though, what a real shame. But everything else as well. So yes, I'm going to forgive.
You can imagine how you would think they'd been shot because it's a sudden poleaxe. Then he's got this blood coming out of his head.
Blood everywhere. Oh,
anyway, it's the people's verdict. That's what we're after here. So what's going to go on? Do you forgive Joe DiMaggio? Yes or no? 61054. Just before the news, we got a confession from Joe DiMaggio, who, with his police chums, was playing baseball with a pool cue when the steel weight flew out of one end and hit Baron Munchausen, a colleague, on the head. Everyone thought he'd been shot. It made an almighty mess. And the people's verdict is now in.
Everyone forgives tonight. Phil in Audenshaw says, definitely forgiven, just for the nickname Bradall. So funny. Andy in Cornwall, forgiven. I worked in the control room of one of the other emergency services. We had a similar game of rounders, and a colleague of mine collapsed with a racing heart from the strenuous running around the desks and excessive laughing. This was over 20 years ago. I saw her recently and happy to report she's still alive and healthy. And Leon Hull says, forgiven. As an ex-police officer myself, of course I'm going to forgive. I worked with many like the Baron. It also reminds me I have a policing confession I should share. And as no one involved is still in the job, the names won't change. However, I already know that Susie won't forgive.
Okay, well, thanks very much for the verdicts. We'd like your confession, particularly if you also know someone like the Baron. Confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Time for a little sharpener before we progress to the tacky world of the confession. What have you chosen for us today, Suze?
I have picked kind of an unofficial Prosecco today, because it's called Lemos. It's technically a Glera Frizzante from San Polo di Pieve, I think.
Almost,
Matt,
yeah, let's go for that.
Italy. It's just really tasty. It's not as dry as Prosecco, and all of the fermentation happens in the bottle. So
how reassuring.
Very lovely.
I like mine to happen.
Well, yeah, as opposed to in your stomach.
Don't want
very good. Thanks, Suze. Okay, today's confession, as I said, 12 certificate and a degree of masking going on, changing language here and there.
Oh, right. Okay.
It comes from Stephen. Father Simon, I send you today a tale of cowardice, treachery, and bribery. The year is 1967. I am 13 years old, and my friend and I have decided to go on a fishing trip to Bridgnorth from Wolverhampton on a bus. Upon arriving at Bridgnorth on a warm and sunny day, we made our way to the riverbank. We both selected fishing spots, mine down a steep bank in between two bushes, Pete's about 10 yards further upstream. We were both excited. This was going to be fun. I set up to tip fish. Are you a fisherman?
No, not so much. No.
I set up to tip fish, which means you select the softest tip.
The softest tip
to fish, yeah.
Okay.
Which meant that you watch the end of your rod to see if you had a bite while sitting on your basket. So anyway, I'm none the wiser. But anyway, this is the way Stephen is describing what he's up to. And I was keeping quiet and still, like you had to do. To the side of me, I had my maggot box.
Oh, lovely.
I had been fishing for about half an hour and had no bites whatsoever. So I decided to bring in my bait and change it for fresh bait. So I brought it in. I turned to my side only to see a giant water rat sitting right next to my maggot box. The rat was sitting as if it was a meerkat on its rear legs, paws in the air and head not far away from my waist. I could clearly see the whiskers. We both looked into each other's eyes, and then I screamed, jumped into the air, heart in my mouth. The rat jumped in straight to the river and disappeared. The last thing I saw was its tail, as thick as a broom handle, sliding under the water. I leapt off my basket, scrambled up the bank, and ran stumbling to where Pete was fishing, and I sat down beside him. He turned round and said, "You look pale, what's the matter with you?" Because he was from London.
Yes, also, yeah.
Although via Wolverhampton.
Correct.
And I said, "Oh, nothing, I'm a bit bored, I haven't had a bite." Because obviously I didn't want to appear a weedy wet.
No.
Pete said, "Well, why don't you come and have a fish by me, because there's plenty of room here." And then he said, "Give us a smoke, bacon crisp."
What?
He was 13, so that's what it is.
Oh, I see. Right, I've got it. Yeah, right. Yeah,
Quickly, without thinking, I said, "Yeah, all right, I do have some. But if you want one, you're going to have to go and fetch my tackle first." So Pete was obviously desperate for a smoky bacon crisp. Yep. And he went off chuntering something about "you idle housey father."
Yeah.
And in no time at all, he brought my tackle, and then I set up next to him. Pete had been more successful than me catching fish using a so-called fly fishing method, which involved a single hook with a white maggot on the end and casting it to and fro. He caught a number of silverfish, so I changed my setup to his and fished by the side of him. After an hour or so, Pete had decided to enjoy the smoke, bacon crisp, that I had given him, and sat on the bank behind me. At this point, you might have no idea where this is heading.
No idea.
Because then, says Stephen, disaster struck. On one of my casts, I was a bit adrift with my technique, and the hook, complete with maggot, caught Pete's top eyelid. I was mortified, says Stephen. The magnet was dangling in front of his eye. The hook, however, had hooked. And obviously, he was in some pain. And in those days, we used barbed hooks, which were somewhat difficult to remove.
Oh, no.
And then he says, but eventually I removed it, despite Pete wriggling and squirming like a baby. Anyway, so hang on a second. So you removed a fish hook.
No.
I did.
You did say.
I did warn you.
You did say.
He insisted upon another smoky bacon crisp in order to calm his nerves as compensation. I had intended to tell Pete about the giant rat on the bus on the way home when we were well away from the river. However, as that incident had led to the hooking of the eyelid, I felt I couldn't really tell him. Don't suppose he'd have been that interested anyway. So in my guilt and shame, I bought the bag of chips that we normally shared together on the way home. And Pete seemed quite happy about that as compensation. He didn't have to pay half the chips. I paid for all of them.
Oh, right, all of the chips.
That's generosity. Well, if you hook someone's eyelid, that's the least you can do. Anyway, this act of treachery and cowardice has stopped with me all these years, says Stephen. P.S. Great show.
Yes.
Well, I mean, that's very nice of you. Thank you very much indeed. I can imagine how you wouldn't have passed that on for a while. But anyway, a shocking fisherman's tale, a fisher boy's tale, really. Suze, what do you say?
Yeah, Stephen, no. That made me feel sick. That was, I can't even.
Everyone was all right in the end?
Yeah, everyone was all right in the end, but just so gross. I just can't. It just makes me feel a bit sick. And also, I don't condone smoky bacon crisps. Terrible flavour. No one should have them, especially not at 13. I'm not going to forgive.
Okay, Brother Matthew.
I'm going to forgive. I mean, we learnt a lesson there, didn't we, about the soft tips and the fly fishing. And you're not supposed to. You don't sit behind someone who's casting a rod, do you? It's a bit like Helicopters, don't stand behind helicopters and fly fishing. Because there was in that movie, wasn't there, with the man with the thing. So,
Sorry,
so all of those things. Well, Something About Mary. There it is. Happened in there, didn't it? Ben Stiller, what a
Fringe.
Yes, lesson for us all. So for those reasons, I'm going to forgive.
Haven't quite followed that myself. But anyway, where the helicopters come into it. Anyway, People's Verdict, please do you forgive Stephen the Fish Person, 61054. But just before the news, a bit of an eye-watering confession from Stephen. 2 13-year-olds going fishing, enjoying the weather, the maggots and the smoky bacon crisps.
Yes.
And then Stephen, casting off rather badly, hooked Pete's eyelid. But everything was fine in the end. Everyone is okay. And we can breathe again. People's Verdict, here we go.
Forgiven, says Dave. I'm a fisherman myself, and you've got to be careful with that rod. Still forgive, though, as it was only an accident. Baz says, forgiven. I love fishing. It's my favourite hobby, as you just sit there in silence and completely relax. His mate shouldn't have been sat so near to him to get a fish hook in the eyelid. But Sarah in Verwood says, not forgiven. This confession really resonates with me. My nan was behind her husband when he was fishing, and he cast off, and the hook got stuck in her cheek.
Oh, dear.
I always steer clear of fishermen.
All right, okay. It occurs to me that there might be, given how popular fishing is,
yes,
that there may well be a few other fishing confessions.
Definitely.
It was that big, for example.
Yes.
Confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk. And it is 5:45, which means it's high time we had a little sharpener from the trolley. What are you lining up for us today, Sue?
Well, this is definitely a sharpener. It's a sour beer, Vault City, very good for that. This one is a lemon iced tea table sour. So it's like lemon iced tea and sour beer all in one, and 3.4%.
Okay, so you can go. You can have a half before you go to bed. I think.
Yes.
That's
before you go to bed.
Yes, I think so. That's fair enough.
Okay,
I'll put you to sleep. Okay, today's confession comes from Dave. Dave, thanks very much indeed for this. Father Simon and the Crackly Frequency crew. No warnings needed, I think, for the first time this week.
good.
Oh, good.
I write seeking forgiveness for myself and my friends who I recently met up with, again at a school reunion, celebrating 40 years since we left. Back in the early summer of 1986, at a perfectly respectable boarding school in Derbyshire, an institution devoted to the noble pursuits of discipline, scholarship, and finding increasingly creative ways to avoid both, a small group of us decided that what the place truly lacked was culture. Not the approved Latin grammar and hymn practice sort of culture, no. We were visionaries, disruptors, pioneers of a new medium. What the school needed, we concluded, was pirate radio.
Oh.
Fortunately for this bold endeavour, among our number was a boy whose understanding of electronics was so advanced it existed somewhere between science and wizardry. Within days, Radio Eric was born. The name naturally was a tribute to Eric the Half a Bee, the Monty Python song.
Yeah.
Because if one is going to illegally commandeer the airwaves, one might as well do so with a certain intellectual flourish. It lent the whole enterprise a veneer of sophistication, which was helpful given that our actual output consisted largely of rumours, gossip and the occasional fart. Maybe you could suggest a similar show for Greatest Hits Radio. One of your streaming.
Yes.
I think that'll go down very well.
Indeed.
Our programming was, in our eyes, revolutionary, groundbreaking, journalism at its most fearless. We tackled the issues that really mattered. Breaking news, did you hear who was snogging who behind the bike sheds? Analysis was thorough, sources were shaky, accuracy variable. Entertainment value was, however, exceptional. The response was immediate and electrifying. Corridors buzzed with speculation. Dining hall whispers turned into broadcast confirmation within hours. We were no longer mere students, we were broadcasters. Influencers before influencers were a thing. Even some of the teachers knew about Radio Eric. But as history consistently demonstrates, all great empires contain within them the seeds of their own destruction. Ours came in the form of Johnny, our housemaster. Why'd you call your housemaster Johnny?
Yeah.
A little bit casual. Johnny was a man of routine, order, and a deep attachment to having his evening sherry and watching television. One evening, he reported a most peculiar phenomenon. His TV reception had become inexplicably dreadful. Tragically for Johnny, he chose to consult us why this might be. Without hesitation, without even the courtesy of a meaningful pause, the nerd genius we had on board delivered his diagnosis. Grave faces were adopted, voices lowered. It's almost certainly radioactive interference, we explained, from Chernobyl.
Oh.
This was, we felt, particularly convincing given that Chernobyl had indeed occurred in April that year, lending our entirely invented explanation a troubling veneer of plausibility. We elaborated with increasing confidence and decreasing scientific integrity that such radiation could affect electronic signals and possibly people. We advised purely out of concern, Sir or Johnny, that he should probably minimize his time outdoors. And he believed us completely. In the weeks that followed, Johnny could be observed navigating the school grounds like a man living inside a low-budget spy thriller. He darted between buildings, hugging walls, glancing nervously at the sky, as though it might at any moment begin glowing ominously. Outdoor time was reduced to the absolute legal minimum. Derbyshire, in his mind, had transformed into a nuclear exclusion zone. Meanwhile, with Johnny effectively self-isolating long before that was fashionable, we found ourselves with unprecedented freedom. Specifically, unrestricted access to the students' television room. And thus began what we considered a true golden age. Not of pirate radio, but of football viewing. Because the 1986 World Cup unfolded before us in a blissful, uninterrupted style. No supervision at all. Everything was perfect. Until Maradona. Diego Maradona's Hand of God goal, as you may recall, was rather controversial. Because it was a cheat. To one particularly passionate schoolboy in our midst, it was not just controversial, it was a personal affront. And so, in a moment of pure, unfiltered sporting outrage, he hurled his can of drink towards the TV. The projectile struck the television with devastating efficiency. The result was catastrophic. The screen died. The match vanished. Silence fell, broken only by the faint hiss of a set that had, moments earlier, been the centre of our universe. We had destroyed our own golden age. And so as the summer term drew to a close, it's like an entire episode of the sitcom. We found ourselves reflecting on what we'd achieved. We'd launched a pirate radio station, we'd convinced our housemaster he was living under nuclear threat, and we had, with astonishing efficiency, engineered our own downfall by breaking the television. As for apologies, well, we feel they are due not to Johnny, who really should have questioned the nuclear theory we came up with, not to Mikhail Gorbachev, who may or may not have benefited from our creative interpretation of global events, but to our fellow boarding housemates for giving them greatness and then smashing it with a well-aimed can of drink. He put drink in inverted commas, so I've got no idea why would you put drink in inverted commas?
Oh, because it might have been a different kind of drink.
Oh, I see. I see what you mean. Okay. Something at 3.5%.
I think so.
Like that.
Yes.
With kindest regards, Dave. Well, so it's a boarding school story of making your housemaster think he's under nuclear attack and then blowing up the television with a can of ale. Anyway, Sister Susie, what do you say?
Well, I feel sorry for the housemaster because they weren't very nice to him, and also, you know, a waste of beer, if it was beer, or a waste of drink, and vandalism at the telly. You know, just because you're annoyed, and I never get this with football, is that why would you throw things and get so cross? Because it's just a game. That's my opinion. But I'm not going to forgive.
Brother Matthew.
Okay, so I'm going to forgive. Number one, housemaster Johnny is obviously a bit thick. Come on. If you're being the after effects of Chernobyl are going to be that your telly is just a little bit snowy. That doesn't make sense at all.
No.
And him running around and trying to avoid the skies. How did he even get that job? Anyway, and also they throwing the stuff at the telly, that was self-defeating. Would have missed the Gary Lineker goal, wouldn't they? If they'd thrown it after the handball, even though England went out. But there were plenty of other decent games in Mexico 86, so you missed out on that. So they've already had their punishment in a way. So for all those reasons, I'm going to forgive.
Okay, so it's the people's verdict for Dave. Does he get your forgiveness, yes or no? 61054. Before the 6 o'clock news, we had a confession which involved, in no particular order, a boarding school in Derbyshire in 1986, the World Cup, a smashed television, Maradona, Mikhail Gorbachev, Chernobyl, a nuclear fallout, a pirate radio station, and Monty Python. Together in an extraordinary story from Dave. Does he get the forgiveness? Here we go with the verdict.
Not forgiven, says Peter. I was with Dave right up until the destruction of the TV. Pirate radio, forgivable. Psychological warfare, questionable. Missing the rest of the World Cup, unforgivable. Bartholomew says, I'm forgiving.
Bartholomew.
Yes, well done. I'm forgiving this because them starting a pirate radio station as students is a genius idea, and I wish I'd done the same. But Gregory says, forgiven. As someone who taught teenagers for 30 years, I can assure you this is far from the worst thing a boarding school boy has ever done. Forgiven without hesitation.
Well, I think there'll be some other boarding school confessions on the way. Confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk.
Great though, weren't they?
Not to make it sound fantastic. Although I do feel the need for a sharpener. What have you got for us, Suze?
Well, I've got something. I just like the name of this one, but I'm sure it is very tasty. It's called Bedtime Pickles.
Okay.
It's a New England IPA. They're always really strong, so this one is 7%.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
And it's completely wholly Nelson Sauvin hops.
Oh, they're
Nelson
always...
and Sauvin.
Are they together
one.
again?
Yeah. Have them around for tea.
Just one.
Julie sends in today's confession. We're back at school. Father Simon, the Confessional Collective. It's 1972. The place was a West Yorkshire coal mining town. I was a young teacher in the local secondary modern, and it was no place for sissies. At this time, the clever kids who passed their 11 plus were sent to grammar school or technical college. The rest went to their local secondary modern, where teachers were expected to teach useful subjects and life skills. These kids were great, but hard as nails, and they could smell signs of teacher weakness or fear. I was local to the town and a miner's daughter, so was well used to handling the wicked, dry humour of God's own country, which is, for the purposes of this confession, West Yorkshire. I was in my 3rd year of teaching at the school when we gained a new drama teacher, who I will call Tristram.
Of course.
Tristram was from the leafy glades of Surrey and was fresh out of teacher training college. He had high ideals, and after failing to gain a position teaching classics, he'd come up north with a mission to bring some much-needed culture to the rough and ready lads and lasses of Yorkshire. At our first staff meeting, Tristram enjoyed giving the staff a long and detailed presentation of his very high teaching goals and subject matter. We immediately recognised what might be some areas of conflict and offered help and advice on appropriate teaching approaches and lesson material. Tristram, though, was having none of it, dismissing all our advice and even insisting that we would also benefit from raising our own standards and following his example. His first day in class didn't go too well. The immediate difficulty was communication, as he failed to understand the Yorkshire brogue. Some phrases completely baffled him. For example, will I eckers like? He didn't get that. I'll tell you this for nout. He didn't get that either.
Oh, nice.
If only Nigel was here, he could have helped us out. His first performing arts lesson was a joy to behold. 15-year-old boys were not used to being told to dance like spirits of the forest. And A Midsummer Night's Dream became more of a nightmare from Hades. The kids were merciless, and Tristram's learnt a few more Yorkshire phrases than he was expecting. However, he ploughed on with his mission, confident in his ability to bring high culture to the darkest of Yorkshire. The kids were becoming restless, parents were complaining, and general discipline was breaking down. Plots and schemes were being hatched in the classroom, and Tristram was falling for many a childish prank. For example, when he wanted to take his class outside for country dancing. Oh, yes. We teachers told him it was no problem, and he could plug in the record player in an electric socket in a large tree on the top field.
What?
People on the passing bus were really amused to see him standing on a table with a cable looking for a socket up a giant sycamore whilst being egged on by 35 laughing 12-year-olds. But the scheme that got us into trouble was this. It was usual practice then for a group of us to leave the school on Friday lunchtime and eat at a local hostelry. Tristram was horrified at this, telling us we were unprofessional and threatening to inform the authorities. But, said I, it's approved by the authorities, and they even gave us some lunch vouchers as a reward for good work. This wasn't true. But Tristram immediately needed to know why he hadn't been included in this, and I advised him to check with the deputy head. Well, said deputy head was extremely fond of a good joke and told Tristram that he was indeed entitled to lunch vouchers and should collect them later at the office. The school secretary was quite masterful at counterfeiting and made a very convincing job of it. And after collecting his vouchers, Tristram was delighted to join us for lunch. The hostelry staff played their part brilliantly, accepting his vouchers and even congratulating him on his excellent teaching. The rest of us had to foot the bill. Tristram was quite unbearable the following week, gloating about his rewards and giving unwelcome advice to long-serving and experienced teachers. When Friday came, he was given double lunch vouchers for his outstanding contribution to teaching, but we decided we must confess our joke at lunch. Unfortunately, he didn't join us at the hostelry.
Oh, no.
So we thought we'd been rumbled, but this was not the case. Tristram, it turned out, had decided to take his girlfriend out for a meal on Friday night using the fake vouchers for payment. The landlady was nowhere to be found, and the evening staff knew nothing about our scheme. He had no cash and became extremely annoyed.
Oh dear.
Apparently he caused quite a scene, and the police were called.
Oh,
What?
The school head teacher was contacted to vouch for him, and she had to cover the bill. We were all in deep trouble on Monday morning, and we each had to go in turn for a good dressing down from the head teacher, a terrifying figure who patrolled the corridors, tapping her shoes with her smoky dragon cane. Tristram didn't forgive us and left the school at the end of the term to teach drama at a public school in the home counties.
Of course he did.
He vowed never to set foot on Yorkshire soil again. 54 years have now passed, and it's time to beg forgiveness for myself and other teaching staff for our part in this story. Even though he was a massive pain in the rear, we teachers should have known better and set a good example rather than reverting to such childish behaviour. I hope that Tristram eventually forgave us and saw the funny side. I kind of think that he's not... Oh,
Wow, that was a great fade. I loved
didn't
it.
do that
My
one.
favourite.
Was that me? Someone wrong is on the faders tonight. I don't know what happened there.
Silly boxing
I was
glove.
affected by Tristram, I think.
Yes.
Yes,
And his
definitely.
Hello Clouds, Hello Sky approach to drama. Sister Suze.
Well, Julie, like, I kind of started off thinking maybe you were a little bit mean to Tristram. You know, he was just trying to be helpful and teach well and all of that stuff. But inevitably, he just sounds like an idiot, doesn't he? And it was the fact that he was so cross that the police were called.
Yep.
The police were called. Like, you know, if it doesn't work, just foot the bill. How tight can you be?
Well,
I'm going to
very-
forgive Julie.
Very tight. I do like the idea of telling 15-year-old lads to be spirits of the forest.
Yes,
What do you say, Matt?
Well, I'm going to forgive Tristram and his... I mean, listen, obviously, you know, there's lots of great drama teachers out there, I'm sure. But there are also quite a lot of them who are a bit of a chancer, like Tristram. He strikes me as very thick, trying to plug his record player into a tree. That should have been a clue. And also...
But they told him it was
They
there.
did, yeah, someone tells you to... Anyway,
Still a tree.
it's still a tree, isn't it? And also, who doesn't take money out when you're going for a meal, even if you've got your vouchers? You might want to get a drink. So he's thick on all counts, really, isn't he? So for that reason,
Yes.
I am going to forgive.
Thank you, and thank you for not doing the voiceover as well. People's verdict, please, for Tristram, 61054. Just before the news, we had a confession from Julie in West Yorkshire, a painful story of a drama teacher who we called Tristram. In a West Yorkshire school in 1972, he had some fancy ideas, fell foul of everybody, and then got involved with luncheon vouchers and the police.
Oh, no.
And the people's verdict is in now, I think. Here we go.
Susan from Harrogate says, forgiven. I feel a little sorry for Tristram, but he was warned repeatedly and chose not to listen. Anyone who sends Yorkshire teenagers out to dance like woodland spirits is asking for trouble. But Alan says, not forgiven. Teachers are supposed to set an example. Instead, you all behaved exactly like the pupils. Poor Tristram may have been pompous, but he deserves support, not sabotage. But Helen says, forgiven. The head teacher having to rescue him from a disastrous date is the sort of consequence nobody could have predicted. You were naughty rather than malicious.
And remember, the head teacher was a terrifying figure who patrolled the corridors with her shoes and a smoky dragon cane.
I've no idea what that is.
I don't know. It's obviously a cane in the shape of a smoky dragon, or she referred to her cane as smoky dragon.
Or the cane was smoky. Yes,
and made out of a dragon.
Could have been that.
I don't
couldn't it?
know. Anyway, it's all pretty confusing. Anyway, confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk.